Ladies and gentlemen, the scandals A, B, and C, put the IRS scandal wherever you want to put it. And when it comes to the IRS harassing Tea Party groups, conservative groups, pro-Israel groups, all these groups, we've had people on this show talk about the fact that, you know, they had a lot of members who didn't want to deal with it anymore. They thought about giving up their fight to form their organization, etc. And joining us now is our friend John Fund, Newsmax Contributor, who's here to talk about the fact that this is real intimidation and real voter suppression when it comes to the IRS harassing these people. John, welcome back.
Thanks, Steve. You know, last year, everybody on the left side of the spectrum was complaining about voter suppression. They said these
voter ID laws, yeah,
for voter ID, clearing up absentee ballots, getting, you know, the dead and the you know, the ineligible off the rolls were really just the return of Jim Crow, a poll tax. Well, it turns out, of course, that there were no real evidence surfacing of that. In fact, African-American voter turnout was higher than white turnout for the first time in American history.
Yeah.
So, no voter suppression there. But in Washington, the IRS was engaging in their form of voter suppression because the Tea Party was a massive political force. It swept the 2010 elections, and suddenly its momentum stopped. Now, I think some of that was because it was no longer the new kid on the block, but some of it was a lot of Tea Party organizations were applying for nonprofit status. Now, that nonprofit status allowed them to do some political and educational work, up to 50%, and so they were applying. That meant they could get donors. But the donors weren't going to contribute if they didn't get a tax deduction and if they didn't have a good housekeeping seal of approval. I mean, who are you? You know, the government doesn't even recognize you.
Right.
The government doesn't. Why is your paperwork tied up? Something wrong with you?
Why do you need a stamp when I mail the contribution? Why not? Is no postage necessary?
A lot of groups never got off the ground. Yeah. A lot of groups never started projects they were planning. One of them is True the Vote, which was a group that was combating voter fraud.
Right.
They've been waiting 3 years for their status. So a lot of things True the Vote and other groups were planning to do weren't done. I call that voter suppression because it's suppressing political and educational activity. And it was so petty. I know one group that was just trying to educate people on the Constitution. They applied for status 2.5 years ago. You know when the first time they ever heard from the IRS was?
2.5 years later. No.
Last Monday.
Wow.
A week ago.
Wow.
Suddenly
nothing,
they
not
said,
even a request for anything?
No.
No denial?
We're working on it. We're working on it.
Boy.
So they weren't, some people were buried with paperwork requests.
Yeah.
Some people were just ignored. But if you're ignored, you don't get your status.
Right. That's almost worse. It is incredible, and that's one aspect of this that has really gone unnoticed, and bravo to you for, you know, for bringing that up, because it's so very true. But it just, you think more of these groups and these leaders of these groups that persevered and stuck with it and did not give up and did not go away.
Well, thankfully, a lot of them did stay in the game, but a lot more could have gotten into the game.
True.
And now we have a situation where they still haven't gotten into the game. And who knows? I mean, now the IRS is so gummed up. You know, it's running around like a fire drill that doesn't seem to ever end.
Yeah.
And who knows if these groups are ever going to get their status? Maybe they'll just freeze everything in place. But you know, left-wing groups got their status right away, no problem. And in fact, one group was very clever. They changed their name to something that sounded progressive. And they filed under a different category. They filed under a different name.
And they went unnoticed.
New application. They got their thing within a few months.
That is amazing. What? You're not a lawyer, obviously, but I wonder if everybody did that.
No, but I play one on TV.
Right, I'm very But if you did that, and then once you have your status, as long as you keep everything else the same, could you change your name, or would you have to then get a?
No, you have to get a new application.
Right, so that doesn't work. Okay, we're talking to John Fund, the Newsmax Contributor here on the Steve Malzberg Show. So when I introduced you and we got into this, I said A, B, or C, 1, 2, or 3. Pick your scandal. How would you rate the 3? The IRS scandal, the Justice Department with the subpoenas for the media, and Benghazi?
Well, we don't know because we have incomplete information. Let me ask you some hypothetical questions.
Oh, good. You can interview me?
On the reporters' subpoenas.
Yes.
Does anyone believe that the Associated Press and Fox News were the only ones?
Oh, no. Holder told National Public Radio the day before he testified, eventually the next day, and we played this, he was asked, and he said, well, you know, I don't know how many I've signed off on. Some I've rejected. So
You
right
know,
then and there, we knew.
obviously his AutoPed was doing it for
Well,
him.
here's the thing.
You know, the AutoPed and the teleprompter are obviously the two most important things in this administration.
Well, the House Judiciary Committee is investigating whether Eric Holder lied under oath on May 15th when he made a statement that talked about the fact of the Espionage Act of 1917. He said, in regard to potential prosecution of the press for the disclosure of material, this is not something I've ever been involved in, heard of, or would think would be wise policy. But NBC News reported, and it's been confirmed by the Justice Department, that Holder, his claim that he had not done any of that, is not true because he signed off on James Rosen's subpoena.
So that one's going to grow. Second question.
Bunch of racists in that committee, by the way, for daring to question him.
Regarding Benghazi,
Yes.
more whistleblowers are going to come forward.
That's what yes.
And they have interesting things to say. And you know what? They especially have interesting things to say about how they've been shut up the last 6 months and denied their free speech rights.
And I believe it's not good for Hillary or Obama either.
And the third question is, Max Baucus, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, a Democrat, says there's a lot more that's going to come out of the IRS scandal.
Yes.
Now, he's a Democrat. I believe him. Do you think Max Baucus is right? I do.
I think Max Baucus, the outgoing Max Baucus, Senator
Who
Baucus,
suddenly has become unburdened.
Yes, he's found new life and new guts.
New oversight.
New oversight. But okay, so let's talk a little bit about just right now about. I mean, you're a journalist. You wrote many years for the Wall Street Journal and other publications. Now you're here with Newsmax. You have fears that maybe, or any indication that maybe, stick with the fears, that you could have been a target for some reason, or that you might be targeted down the road by this administration or
During the
justice?
Clinton years, I certainly was targeted, as, by the way, other people associated with Newsmax have been.
Right.
Who would know? It may take us several years to find out, but I would not be surprised.
Yeah, and when you hear about James Rosen not only being targeted the way that the AP was targeted, but being named actually, and now it turns out they shopped around, according to reports. They shopped around to 3 judges. They got the third one to okay the subpoena and put James Rosen on as a co-conspirator.
There's an old saying: you can get a
ham sandwich.
No, a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. Well, if you don't like one judge, you look for another. You don't like that judge, you look for another. That's how they're operating.
But this is, I mean, I've had Alberto Gonzalez on this show. I had Attorney General Mukasey on this show, Donald Rumsfeld on this show. I had one liberal guest who said, well, you got to blame the Patriot Act because it allowed for these things to happen. And I said, but it didn't happen under Bush and all the years that the Patriot Act was in effect. It's only happening under this administration.
I do agree with him this much. I think the Patriot Act should be sunsetted. I think we do need to reevaluate it every few years. I don't think it should be a permanent fixture of American life unless we can have clear, compelling evidence that it should be renewed. On that part, I agree.
Okay,
but you don't. Not every administration misuses it.
Right.
This administration may well have.
Yeah, no, it certainly looks that way. Okay, well, going forward, I'm looking forward to the Benghazi people. Darrell Issa has just subpoenaed the State Department records on all the emails on the talking points. Remember that Friday document dump? The same day he announced he was firing the interim head of the IRS.
I call them the fibbing points, by the way.
The fibbing points.
Let's just
they released 100 of them. By the way, and the woman who was in charge of communications for the State Department has just gotten, or is apparently going to get a promotion to Assistant Secretary of State.
Do you detect a pattern here? The woman in charge of exempt organizations of the IRS is now in charge of Obamacare at the IRS, a much bigger office. Woman at the State Department is being promoted. It seems
Rice is going to get a promotion.
Rice is getting a promotion. It seems this is called failing upward. This is the Peter principle at work in the Obama administration. You mess up, you get into a scandal, you get promoted.
No, it is something. I just, the media, which was outraged on all of these for a time, especially the media, the Justice Department.
There's still time for new outrage to surface.
I hope, because we really can't let this go.
Bob Schieffer's on CBS is on fire. He's on fire.
He said to Pfeiffer last week, he said, with all due respect, what are you doing here? Where's the chief of staff? And this week, he said, wouldn't it be better for someone other than the Attorney General to investigate the Attorney General?
Historical memory is important. He was around during Watergate, and you know what? He can see a stone wall when a stone wall appears in front of him.
I hope so. All right, John Fund, always great to talk to you. We'll read you at Newsmax. And, folks, we're continuing right here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Don't go away.
The Steve Malzberg Show.